thank you very much for doing this. It's an honor to meet you guys, and you too, Michael. I don't think we've actually ever, I think it's been mostly email. I don't think we've ever actually talked on the phone. So great to meet you also. It sounds like you guys actually know each other. I wasn't sure about that.
Well, it's been a long time.
Well, that can be good. Then you can
But
catch up.
yeah, we can catch up. And by the way, Michael, thank you for sending that beautiful photo of Tina. That was
Yes.
really nice.
It is
Happy,
a
happy to do it. I love that picture. So
Yeah, it's a good one.
love that picture. I think that those were the hazy, crazy days, right? So, we hung out at parties, but, like remembering 40 years ago, the details are fuzzy for all of us.
well, it was small talk because it was loud.
That's true.
Couldn't really have a conversation in those places.
Right. I kind of remember that I used to be in the concert business in Canada, and you kind of develop, I don't know about you guys, but you kind of develop the ability to sort of follow along the conversation, even if you can't hear the person. It's almost like you get little pieces and you nod. And
There's a lot of nodding.
so do you feel like do you want to just start, maybe talking a little bit about how you did sort of meet and what it was like, in Boston, I guess in particular, because that's where you were working mostly, Michael. But it can go wherever you want, and if you kind of feel like there's a kind of a lull or something, I could jump in with some questions. But otherwise, I'm just going to mute myself and let you guys have at it, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, did Tina and Chris, did you feel like there was a big fan base in Boston? Do you feel like, that there was a big underground and that was really into the music?
Yes, definitely. I mean, the Rat was not the first place we played in Boston. The first place we ever played in Boston was called The Club in Cambridge. And I don't know if you've ever went to that place. We never went again because it didn't have a very good vibe. But the reason we booked in there was Jerry Harrison of the Modern Lovers. The Modern Lovers had broken up, and I had gotten in touch with Jerry about the possibility of joining Talking Heads. And Jerry said, well, I'd like to see you play first before I make a decision about this, understandably. And but he'd heard about us and stuff, so he was interested. We booked ourselves a gig at this place called The Club. And I think their big claim to fame was that one of the members of Aerosmith liked to hang out there. And so we played, and I don't think the audience got us at all. And I could see Jerry out in the audience, and he was looking very sort of puzzled and circumspect. but it turned out that he did like the band, and he eventually did join the band. And we started playing more often in Boston. It took a while for Jerry to fully make up his mind, but we started playing the Rat as a 3-piece, and we would get Jerry to sit in with us. And we did numerous weekends there, and there was as much a scene there as I would say there was in New York, really, in terms of attendance.
We had the blessing of the late Risers Club, which is where Oedipus comes from, and all those great DJs. Oedipus is a very dear friend of mine. And, so they started that first college radio station. It was the first punk new wave radio station, I think, in the world. And it was the late Risers Club from 9 to 12. So, I know we had a great fan base. The Rat was amazing, right? I mean, I can't believe I never saw you guys at the Rat, because I was hanging out at the Rat all the time.
Well, we met a number of the local Boston scene makers there. Willie Loco Alexander and John Felice, and the guys, the guys who later became the Cars.
Elliot and David Robinson.
Yes.
And Rick. And Rick was very shy, but David
Yes.
and I were friends, and Elliot and I are friends. So,
Yeah,
I mean, that must have been the mid 70s, almost 76, 77. Do you remember?
This
Yes.
was, yes.
76, 77, exactly.
Yes, that was.
Yeah. I think it was just a few years before, because I saw you at Berkeley or the Orpheum, or, and we got you guys to come to the after parties every time you played. We were talking before we started recording that you were the only two that would like party on after the show. David was so shy he would never come out, or we never saw him out afterwards. And I don't think Jerry came out much either. But Tina was always there representing. So
Jerry had his own life there,
right,
in Boston, so he would go and hang out with those people. And I don't know what David was up to.
Well, there was also the Paradise,
Yes.
which I think we were one of the first bands to play at the Paradise when it first opened.
that was kind of a nice club. I had to do a photo shoot at the Rat one day and walked in like during the day without the cigarette smoke and the bodies and the sweat, and you smelled like stale beer, cigarette smoke, and vomit on the floor. It was like you realized how disgusting that space was when you walked into it, because it had carpets. It was like, who puts carpet in a club like that? But the Paradise was kind of a respectable, nice, dinner. You can have dinner at the table and watch the show, and
Yeah, I don't remember the dinners, but I do remember it was Don Law who it was his club, and Don Law was, as far as concert promotion goes, he was the man in Boston.
Indeed.
And of course he promoted our shows at the Orpheum, and I don't know about at Berkeley. That was maybe promoted by somebody at the school, but yeah, he was a good guy. He was as concert promoters go, he was a very kind of distinguished person. I think he came from one of those Boston Brahmin families.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the Paradise. Good thing you didn't play at the Channel. There would have been a fight,
We did play the Channel one time with Tom Tom Club.
Okay.
Later on, and it wasn't so bad. It wasn't so bad.
It was in Southie, so it was known for its like brawls and stage dives and a tough crowd of guys usually. So I mean, I remember when Tom Tom Club, the first record came out, and Oedipus really, Oedipus was great because he transformed. He came from college radio and then became the program director at WBCN, and you guys always got played on the K-Rock station in Boston, WBCN, both the Heads and the Tom Tom Club.
Yeah. We did Oedipus's show when he was at MIT, a little radio station in the basement of some building at MIT.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That was the Late Risers Club.
I thought he called it Nocturnal Emissions.
That was when he filled up all the day slots because he was at WBCN and kept a Saturday slot or Sunday slot. He kept one day a week still at MBR, which used to be WTBS. Ted Turner bought the call letters. So yeah, with the big building with the columns, and then you went all the way down in the basement into this little studio.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. There's pictures of Adamant and the Buzzcocks in that studio, in that little tiny studio.
Yeah, those were fun times. And how is Oedipus? Is he good? I haven't seen him for a while.
He's doing great. He's when the book was released, we did a couple of virtual book signings and talks, and he joined me. For those. He's still living in Boston. His wife is from Thailand, and they travel back and forth. So,
oh, nice. Well, and there was also Maxan. Remember Maxan?
I do. I was in the clique of the MBR, MIT, and the WBCN people. Maxan was a different radio station, right? Or was she
She was BCN at least at one stage in her life.
I think she might have been before my time.
Maybe so. Yeah.
But so you live in you guys live in Connecticut, yeah?
Yes, we're here in the wilds of Fairfield County.
Yeah, I spent a couple of summers. My family moved to Darien on 5 Mile River Road, so
Uh-huh.
I know it well.
Yeah, we're a little north of there, but not too far. Yeah.
So, Drew, do you have questions that you want to bring in?
Yeah, just to sort of bring it to photography and image. I'm just curious, one of the things that I was looking at old videos and some photos online of you guys around the time that you were shooting, Michael, and earlier. And it seems like you were, you like, and I was just watching this morning video of your show at CBGB's, and which, and it was kind of associated with punk rock eventually, which, was very much a fashion focused thing as much as punk rock tries to sort of rebel against things. I think they were thinking a lot about what, those bands thought a lot about what they looked like. And even the Ramones, who you played with, it was sort of like the 70s version of the way the bands in the 60s, early 60s all had, suits on. Always kind of thought the Ramones were like, the sort of more modern version of that. But then you guys were more, less focused on that, it seemed to me. And I was just wondering if that was a sort of a conscious choice. Were you thinking about those kinds of things back then, or was it just the music?
Tina, I'll let you answer this one.
We just didn't have any money. So we didn't have cameras, and there were people who were really good photographers around. So we sort of relied on them to to create any kind of legacy for us, because I think David had a cheap Polaroid, and at one time I did get one, and which got stolen in Boston. But it was a very expensive enterprise, as you know, Michael. It's just was very costly, and we really did focus on the music. Everything went back into performance and touring, and the only imagery we really worked on were our record covers, and then later videos.
And was that how much of that was kind of informed by, because you all went to RISD? Like, were you?
Well, RISD did not have it. Very late, our last year that we were at RISD, there was finally a film department, which was started by a friend of ours, Jamie Dalglish. And David used to take advantage of that, even though he wasn't a student at the school. He used to hang out there and borrow equipment and so on. But so David was much more he loved to see himself in the mirror and in imagery, and I hated it. I hated seeing myself. So I mean, this is painful looking at now. So there was.
It's not painful for us.
I would. You're kind and genteel, but I was much more into painting and creating things that I hadn't seen, rather than capturing the moment. So yeah, I later in life, with that Polaroid camera, which the very kind promoter, he got me a replacement, and I did take it around on tour and took pictures, which ended up on one album cover anyway, a live album cover, but of audience. I would take pictures of the Polaroids of the audience. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we really kind of missed the boat on that. We should have, done what we could to get cameras and that sort of thing. A lot of bands were so involved with their look, like say the Clash or the Sex Pistols and so on, and their management was involved with it. But I think we were so much more obsessed with making a difference in what the music sounded like, and investing that way.
We did do a thing where we only ever used white light on stage.
Yeah.
Do you remember this, Michael?
I definitely definitely remember it.
And we did that because we thought, well, the photographers can get a better shot of us if we have white light than if we're in some dark, corner of the stage.
Yeah.
So we flooded the entire stage with white light in the hopes that we would get photographs of the entire band. you know.
Well, you did, and it I think my major take of the band was from that period with White Light, and there were images of the whole band because of it. I'm I think our audience needs to realize that in this day we had to put film in the camera. The film wasn't very high speed, meaning it didn't shoot well in the dark. You couldn't really shoot color a lot because color film didn't do well under low light. You were shooting Tri-X in a camera pushed to 1600 or 800. And no, that was wonderful. And that picture from post-punk new wave of Tina with her bass looking, and her hair up and looking so powerful was definitely in that White Light phase in the stage.
Yes.
That's a great photo.
Yeah, I think that's from 1980.
But I think your question, Drew, about RISD, and I think a couple of things were instilled in us at RISD. One of which was the music and the art of the music should be something that's unique unto our band, and not like we were taught to believe that it's fine to be inspired or to pay homage to the artists and the bands that came before you. But if you ever want to be taken seriously by the serious artists, then you have to reveal something that's unique unto yourself. And that's why we didn't dress up like the New York Dolls or the Beatles or, the Rolling Stones or the Who. We just wore clothes basically like what I'm wearing now, maybe without the stripes. And, polo shirts. And I always say we wore the clothes, well, boys in the band anyway, wore the clothes that our mothers gave us for Christmas. And we were hoping to achieve a kind of everyman look, as opposed to this idea of, the Kinks looked great in those Edwardian suits and everything, but that was the Kinks. That was not Talking Heads,
I think David didn't stop making sense. David had that huge suit.
Yeah.
He would come out in,
yeah,
which was kind of appropriate. You talk about the being unique and the mix of unique music, and that was definitely unique to the music and the lyrics and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think
it was a great prop.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, I know the story about how you, Seymour Stein offered you a record deal and you turned it down at first because you felt like you weren't ready, which is, that's kind of a punk rock move, wearing those sort of regular clothes when everyone else, like Blondie and the Ramones and other bands that were kind of around at the same time were kind of focused. I guess television was kind of doing the same thing, right? They weren't really too focused on that stuff, but you kind of had your own genre, I kind of wonder, like at the time, did you feel like people, you were great, so they were attracted to the music, but they didn't really know how to put you in a box, you weren't punk rock really, and then even you were around at the same time as new wave, but you weren't really like a new wave band in the way that a lot of those bands in the early 80s were.
Well,
you always had your own sort of, and then Tom Tom Club too, in a way, sort of didn't really fit. And I think that comes from what you were saying before about your training, which is be yourself, be inspired, but then be true. Do you think that kind of, does that ring true at all?
Yes. What Chris was going to say is that actually Seymour Stein, who loved Nouvelle Vague, French film, he came up with that term in order to sell Talking Heads. And then everybody else was afterwards. So we were actually the only new wave band there was, and then everybody else was just following. They didn't follow what we did, but they were called the same thing in order to not. It was terrible. Radio wouldn't play, except for Oedipus. Radio just wouldn't play the Ramones, Beat on the Brat with a baseball bat or Blitzkrieg Bop or anything like that, because they just wouldn't touch it. And it was it was a real problem for the rest of us, because after Sex Pistols imploded, and just wouldn't help us. And we needed radio to tour the nation and to go abroad. And so it was very important to give us a new moniker that would distinguish us and set us apart from punk.
Yes, so Seymour could say it was never a problem at WBCN in Boston, but in many parts of the United States, which is a huge country with thousands of radio stations, so many program directors would say, oh no, we don't play punk music. We only play good music. And so Seymour said, but Talking Heads, they're not punk, they're new wave. And the program director out there in Chicago or wherever would say, oh, they're new wave? Well, I guess we could play new wave.
And then
so it was a marketing tool.
It really worked very well because it helped, our manager, Gary Kerr, first was a promoter first before he became our manager. And his idea was to us to play colleges. He said, well, who do you think would be interested in your music? I said, well, college kids, that's probably where we'll do best. You don't put us in some R&B, rhythm and blues club where the, with a bunch of Hell's Angels, they're not going to get it. So he would put students in charge. He would get in touch with the different colleges, and that sort of opened up a whole way and many venues. We opened theaters all over the country, theaters that were, dusty, and we had to dust them off, little theaters, because at that point in time, it was only clubs where people went to drink beer, or there were no medium-sized places. They were all dead, or it was the arena. And we didn't think it was a good idea for us to open for other bands because people would just throw things at us. So we thought it would be demoralizing. And so we headlined all our own shows at these colleges and small theaters. And that opened up the way for television, they didn't tour very much, but definitely for Blondie and for many, many other wonderful new wave
Elvis Costello
British groups. They all followed the Police. Everybody started going to the places where we had opened it up first. And so small promoters could see, there's a little niche here. I don't have to compete with those big arenas, and I don't have to put people in these little dingy bars. I can actually, keep things going. And it was fiscally, it was kind of break even. I mean, it was definitely a labor of love for everybody. I think everybody just did it culturally. Though we couldn't play even in Chris's hometown. I mean, we had to play a pizzeria there.
That's Pittsburgh.
And promote our own shows when we got bigger. But this was a pioneering way of getting through all that was happening. And radio was crucial. And so also newsprint. I mean, going into record stores when vinyl was it. There were cassettes were only just beginning in the late 70s. I think we bought our first boom, cassette player at that time, and we could start hearing what we sounded like because we really didn't know what we sounded like. It's not like today. It was a very different thing, but it was also wide open to creative expression and doing things that made it possible to progress and to go further and to take it further. I mean, today, a little group like Talking Heads would not make it at all. It just wouldn't happen.
I mean, I sort of have this theory that a lot of the music came out through the disdain and frustration of what FM radio was playing in the rock arena, that we all looked at it. I grew up in and around New York, and I was a jazz listener. And I got to Boston as a college student and heard LePest play You're Better Off Dead, or my graduating year, someone brought in in high school the Ramones record, and we're listening to Beat on the Brat, and you're thinking, holy Christ, like this is cool. You know, where'd you find this, right? And I think it was all those college stations that helped break and get people into, you know, into venues to want to see you. It was the, you know, in Boston, the rarity was Oedipus was on the college station and would also play you on the major FM station, but was at WFNX and WMBR and all of those college stations that really helped propel the movement, right?
That is right. That is so right. And you know, we had, no one would go to see a show really, except for their hometown, you know, bands, but they wouldn't go to see a show from somebody coming from out of town because people really didn't have money. I mean, they would have money for once a month, they'd have money for a concert, you know. So they would go to see something live before they'd invest their $14 to buy the record. And so, you know, then we would do the in-store, the radio and the in-store. We'd go to all the radio stations and the in-store and sign records. And then it grew, it snowballed very, very slowly by repetition. I mean, you had to go out every 4 months, you had to go back to a town or they forget about you. And it's a very different way of doing things than now, but it was a super effective and a lot of fun because the kids, once the cassettes started happening, then the kids would make copies of copies and put them in their cars and play the show on their way to the concert and get all, you know, into the vibe of the bands and get really excited beforehand. And they still do that, of course. I mean, that's nothing is new anymore, right? But it was quite a phenomenon, and we had to learn in the first 2 years of that kind of grueling studio tour. You know, we made an album every year for 5 years running, and then we were just on the road all the time, and it was so grueling, and so we had to learn. Don't go to all those after parties. Don't go, because you're going to have to be getting up and driving someplace, and it's exhausting. And people want you to do all the drugs with them, and it's just more than you can handle.
That was the best part.
Oh yeah, for you. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we shared some of those at Kendall Kaufman's house on ComAv. So.
Yeah. But it was really fun the first 2 years to go to see and meet the people after the show, hang out, find out what their record collections were. Different from today's, you know, alternative kids who go and sleep on floors. We slept in motels. At least we did that. But a lot of times the party would sometimes be at our motel. And you know, those were the days of smoking cigarettes, and it was a pretty nasty, dirty job, but somebody had to do it.
Were you at the Howard Johnson's in Kenmore Square?
Yes, we did stay there.
That was a record company favorite. I was friends with Billy Idol also, and he's like, come on, let's go party back at my place at the Howard Johnson's and Square.
We also used to stay at a place out on Route 28, 128. It was like a A-frame kind of building.
Yeah, it looked like a ski lodge.
Yeah, it was really cheap. And we used to stay out there before we could afford the Howard Johnsons.
Well, but I do know when I had a session with when Adrian Ballou had joined the band. I shot David and Adrian, and you were at the Copley Plaza, so you did get upgraded in time.
Yes.
So
yes.
In 1980, there was a sudden upgrade. Of course, you know, it meant that the bands got no salary, and we went home with nothing to live on, because you know you have an 8 or 9 piece band. There's nothing left over at the end after you know hotel rooms. Even though everybody was doubling up, it was just that was sort of. But it was fun, having fun with no money. It kept us hungry, and it kept us motivated to keep, you know, creating more stuff,
right,
more music. More
Yeah, I think
songs.
there's a lot of I feel like limitations like that can actually foster creativity, because once there are so many artists who seem to no longer produce their best work once they've, really kind of made it. It's back when they're scrappy and touring in a station wagon, and it is, I'm sure it was, rough, but the music was great.
Yeah, the music was so special. I mean, all those bands, they all brought something really uniquely new, and yet, of course, we came out. But I think we were one of those bands that wasn't truly based on, Chuck Berry rock chords. We tried. I mean, and sometimes we did resort to those, but we tried as much as possible to avoid that. And I think it was good for us, because had we tried to go for truly pop music, I don't know that we might have succeeded as well. We were a little quirky and a little herky jerky. We just didn't, it was better for us to create our own niche. And I think that's really right.
But you,
I mean, we learned that in art school, that you're better off, don't try to be what that guy does, don't try to be Picasso, don't try to be Van Gogh, just do your own thing.
I
And
think though, I think though that you were at the forefront of that radio shift, right? That systemic radio shift where people were listening to college radio, and the what's called album oriented rock stations, the FM rock stations, had to change. And you did become popular because you were quirky, you did
right.
become, I mean, when Tom Tom Club album came out, it got airplay on major stations right away.
Yeah. Yeah, we were very fortunate that way.
Yeah.
So tell me something. This rock photography museum, where is it?
Well, you're kind of looking at it at the moment.
Ah,
It's really, I mean, just to try to keep it as short as possible. It's just, I want to try to find a way to take that piece of that pop culture and move it into a place where people are going to look at it and the focus isn't on selling fine art. I think not that there's anything wrong with selling fine art, but I think that there are a lot of people who feel intimidated going into the idea of going into an art gallery where they wouldn't going into a museum. And I feel like more there are people love looking at this stuff, as we know. And so that's the plan. I've run like a fine art music photography and licensing company for about a little more than 10 years now. And I was thinking, it was always online, and I was thinking that I needed to open a gallery at some point. And then I just started to think, especially here in LA, because there are two really great galleries here that are already doing that. Like, why just try to do what they're already doing? And then I just started to think about it more, and it just seems like there's room for something like this. Whenever they do a touring exhibition, like there was one about 7 or 8 years ago called Who Shot Rock and Roll that toured around, and it was held over here in LA for months because there were so many people that came to see it. And so and I say to people, as far as the photography part of it's concerned, my pitch is just I'm going to say a word, and then you tell me what comes into your head first, a picture or a song, and you just say, or a sound, and you just say the Beatles. And I think that, not to say that the photography is more important than the music, because it clearly isn't, but I feel like the two things kind of go together, and it's definitely the visual part of it's a big piece of it. And so there's nowhere that really where you can do exhibitions of work that's great, but that might not really be suited to being a print that somebody would want to have on their wall. I think there's a lot of interesting exhibitions that you could do, based on photographers, based on the bands that they're shooting, based on time periods. So it's kind of ambitious. I'm working with a couple of friends on it, while continuing to do my business under this new sort of name. So it's kind of a long-term project, and I'm just doing the things that I can do, like the podcast, and continuing to do the licensing and fine art sales. We're doing some other things as well, but that's kind of the idea behind it.
It's cool.
Okay.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
And by the way, it made me think, Michael, how much I love your book. I
Oh,
mean,
It's a great book.
your book, I love it. You don't know who it is or what it is until you get all the credits at the end in the index. It's just a wonderful way to do it. It's the whole page is just the photograph, and sometimes, well, 2 pages. It's great. It's one of the best rock and roll books ever.
thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that.
It really is fabulous, and I love it.
One of my great regrets is I never got to see Wendy O. Williams perform.
You didn't? I did.
Did I? Where
Yeah.
did we see them?
In Boston.
In Boston.
The
Yeah.
Metro? Were you at the Metro?
I think so.
So that's where that was shot for promotion for WBCN, but the concert pictures of her were at the Metro. That was a crazy show. I was going to make a joke and go, "What'd you say? What'd you say?" Because she covered herself in whipped cream and broke a flower pot and rolled on the stage in it, and then shot a shotgun off right next to my head.
Jesus.
That's
I
painful.
went out. I couldn't hear for 2 weeks, and I went out and bought sonic reducers after that.
Wow, that's a really bad idea.
Good story though.
Yeah, but yeah, we watched her. She used a chainsaw on her guitar on stage.
Maybe I guess I did see them, but
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's why we have a collective memory.
yeah.
You can remember things I can't, and so on.
I remember the bass player.
Yeah.
The image of him with the mohawk and
In a tutu, right?
a tutu, or maybe it was a nurse's outfit. I'm not sure. High heels.
He had a tutu, or it might have been a combination of a tutu and a nurse's outfit. So,
Yeah. Richie Stotts was his name,
Yeah.
I think.
but thank you. There's nothing sexier than a woman with a bass in her hand, though, too, right, Chris?
Oh, this is true.
That was one of my questions.
Funny that you would think of it as sexy, but I just think of it as really practical. Like it gets the job done.
Like a shovel.
Yeah, like a chainsaw. Anyway.
And
Yeah.
you have a new book, Chris.
I have a book. Yes.
I've started reading it. I'm into it just a little bit, but it's great so far.
No, thank you very much. It's coming out. It's been out for about a year, and it's coming out in paperback in October.
Okay.
And it's doing pretty well, I'm happy to say.
Yeah.
Do you have a cover copy of it?
A happy book.
A copy here?
Yeah, just to hold up. I guess
Yeah,
we're
I
only there's no visuals with this podcast.
It's right here, Tina. This is
I love the cover.
yeah.
So it's the paperback that's coming out. Okay.
Yeah, paperback will be
In Spanish, it's called Amor Crónico.
Amor Crónico. Yeah, chronic love.
And
I got some great blurbs. Would you mind if I read the blurb I got from Bill Murray?
Go for it.
Bill Murray said, "From the first time I saw Talking Heads live at CBGB's in 1976, I've had a huge thing for Tina Weymouth. And since then, I've been biding my time, waiting for the right moment to make my move. But after reading Remain in Love by Chris Frantz, it's become pretty clear to me that she's already in a relationship." See pages 3, 33, and 34, etc. And what's more, it looks to be serious. Pages 41, 43 through 48, and especially 47. But you know something? That's okay. I'm happy for Tina and for Chris, a great drummer who has written a great book. So, and I got a wonderful blurb from Debbie Harry and some other good writers also.
That's amazing. He is a extremely funny guy. I had dinner with him once on a photo shoot, and he is Mr. Dry wit,
Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
also very kind.
Yes, he's a great guy.
And most I mean, I haven't met a lot of comedians, but most of them are kind of sad when you get them on their own. They're very lonely and sad. I don't know why that is exactly, but he stays buoyant.
I think that that can be definitely true. So they're very in their head, so to speak. For comedians, I'm always taken aback by it.
He throws one hell of a Christmas party every year. And well, one year, because of the pandemic, it didn't happen one year, but we've been fortunate to go twice to his Christmas party. And at the last one, he got down on his knees and sang the song "Brandy, You're a Fine Girl" to Tina. And that was a very exciting moment.
I bet it was. I bet it was.
A
So
little too exciting.
I think we have a friend in common too, Spencer Drake, the designer.
Oh yeah, I know Spencer. Sure.
I mean, the
We
other
know
great thing about the Talking Heads is you guys produced, I guess it was because of the two of you in part, and RISD, but you guys produced some of the most incredible album art, you know.
We felt like that was something that we could be good at. And we a lot of times I think the record company was kind of frustrated by us because, they just wanted a nice picture of the band on the cover and leave it at that. But we never put the band on the cover.
Well, the first one on the back, Mick Rock
The
took
back
a picture.
cover, but the front cover was just a red block with green letters. And we kind of excelled at that. And we got 2 Grammys actually for our album covers.
Yeah.
But the Grammys go to the artist, not to the band, which is appropriate.
Rauschenberg did a cover for us, Robert Rauschenberg. That was a Grammy.
Yeah, he got a
for
Grammy, and the other was was for a greatest hits package.
Yes.
It's
He's
terrible.
A wonderful guy.
A really good designer, but I just can't think of
very
his name at the
difficult to
moment.
pronounce names.
Yeah.
Stephen.
Yeah, he did those ones covers for Lou Reed that have a lot of writing on Lou's face and stuff. Anyway,
It's terrible when a person's name is just right there, but you can't think of it. What it is.
Yeah, I mean, one of them I remember being very tactile, right? It was
Fear of Music.
Fear of
yeah.
Music. Yeah.
Was
That was a collaboration.
it was based on industrial flooring, non-skid.
What
surface.
happened was we were coming back from the Mud Club, and Jerry could never really drink very much, and he was so drunk, and we were walking, and he said, "Ooh, isn't this great, looking at the Chinese basket weave pattern on the manhole cover?" And then he said, "Hey, that makes me think we should make our album cover should be like that." And he thought he was making a joke. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna try to make a mock-up of this. And so I got some vinyl that was actually vinyl flooring, rubber flooring that was already in that pattern that people use in bars and so on. Padded flooring in chefs' kitchens, and so we made the mock-up that way, and so I think what we were after was always trying to say, okay, this music doesn't place easily with all the rock records or the jazz records or the pop records. It's got to have its own sort of place, like the music, the way the music sounds.
I just remembered that designer's name.
Yes.
Stefan Sagmeister.
That's it.
He's very, very famous in the design world.
Yes, and he's a really good designer. That's why he's famous, I guess. He also had a really nice toilet in his studio. Those ones imported from Japan that shoots water
with the control panel and the hot
the
water.
music and everything.
Plays music. Really nice.
Is the Tom Tom Club on there? Da-da?
I think probably it is. Yeah.
That would be a lot of popular flushes, I think.
Think about the royalties involved with that.
Exactly. Yes, I haven't even heard it as a ringtone, but anyhow.
Who are the voices on that? I've just always been curious because they're these high pitches. Did you do a lot of the vocals on that?
On Genius of Love?
Yeah.
Or all of Tom Tom Club. It's me and my sisters, and then later on, my sisters bailed, and so then it becomes Victoria Pelagi, who sings with me now. She's great.
It's fabulous.
But before that, it was yeah, because when we were kids, we would entertain our families. We lived way out in the sticks. There wasn't a lot of entertainment, so we would entertain our parents' guests, and with performances, either puppet shows or circuses or whatever. And because I was the eldest of the second batch of kids, I was the gang leader of all that, and I'd put them all to work, and so I think maybe that's why they bailed afterwards, is that they didn't want to, my mother loved it that I was actually asking my sisters to work with me, but I think they just wanted to have their own lives. They just said, oh no, not Tina again, making me do this. I always give them great roles, like you get to be the beautiful princess, and you get to be, the queen of the whole show. You get the starring parts. I always gave them that's how I got them in. And I did it again with Tom Tom Club. I gave them kind of starring parts, but they really enjoyed it for about a year.
Well, a lot of people don't realize how hard it is to sustain a band. You think, oh, we made this record and it was really great and we worked really hard, but when the record comes out, that's when the real work begins. And so
they didn't want to be separated from their boyfriends. They didn't want to go on tour and be far away. I mean, they did it once, a tour of Europe and a short few weeks of the US, and they said,
and Japan,
and they said
we went to Japan,
and they enjoyed that. But then when that was over, then the real slog began.
Yeah, who wants to go to Cincinnati, right? Who wants to go to Cincinnati, and who wants to go to Duluth, and who wants to go when you're in Berlin and Rome, and
yes.
And then there was the work, of singing. I mean, it's super physical, and you have to get your sleep, your rest, and you can't party out, and smoke and do cocaine, because it just completely damages everything. And you can't even really, you've got to be careful of even drinking. And they miss their boyfriends mostly, I think. And then they became moms, super moms. I mean, so that was that. I mean, there was a time when we actually did one album cover photo where all three of us were pregnant. And then it got rejected. The record company said, oh no. Now, of course, it's de rigueur that every pregnant actress shows her pregnant belly. But I mean, it was such a great photo shoot and everything. But maybe I can reveal it at some later time. But no, that's too shocking. You can't do that. I mean, even when I was pregnant on tour, I mean, Bob Dylan said, oh, is that the band with a pregnant bass player? There was anything that you did that was different or new, you always had to put up with a lot of stuff.
Where'd you grow up?
Are you talking to me? Chris?
Yeah. No, Tina. Where did you grow up? Because you were talking about your sisters growing up in the little town. And
well, we were often in the sticks, but because my parents it was always cheaper there. But my father was a Navy aviator, and so the first batch of kids were born during World War II. He was in the Pacific, and the second batch of kids, I started the second batch 10 years later, and that was during the Korean War. So there's a little everywhere, East Coast, West Coast.
Tina, I think
Iceland,
how many schools
Hawaii.
did you go to? 12 schools?
I went to 13 schools in 11 years.
Wow. Yeah, they moved around a lot.
But and so there were advantages and disadvantages. I mean, twice I got American history, but I missed out on European history. So I'm having to make up for that now by reading a lot of books about 2,000 years of culture in France and England. So it was a great experience, and it pushed us kids to be creative on our own, because I mean, when you got 8 kids and you're moving around, my parents moved 35 times in 33 years.
Wow.
They had some one or another child in diapers for 20 years. So and those weren't throwaway disposables. so so it was, on an officer's pay, which is very little comparatively. Chris and I, we grew up with parents who were in service. So for us, it was always, well, isn't it wonderful? It just was so normal and natural to be around people who gave of themselves and who were in service to others. And we had such fun because, my parents would say, guess what, kids, we're moving to Iceland. And then I'd have to say, yeah, that's great, but what do I do about my flying squirrel? and it would be those kind of wrenching things, where you'd have to figure out and move on. But it was also really terrific. I mean, my father was the skipper of the Lake Champlain aircraft carrier, picking up Alan B. Shepard. And I was 10 years old, and he wrote me a letter on that very day saying, right now I'm waiting for the capsule to come down. And it was top secret. I mean, nobody knew. I mean, we didn't find out about it. I didn't have to wait until the letter came, because then it was on television and there was my father speaking, So, but it was very, very exciting. When we were in Iceland, I got to meet all the Apollo astronauts. I mean, really amazing guys. And we would go hiking with them and studying the geology of Iceland and finding rocks, obsidian, and so on. And because that's what they were going to be doing. They were going to be having to look at what they might find on the moon and so on. So it was a very exciting life for a youngster. And also when we lived in the DC area, my parents made friends with the impresario Saul Hurok, who brought all the great ballet dancers and all the great symphony orchestras into Washington, DC. And so at that point in time, being a 12-year-old, I got to go on tour. I got to, my mother she was my publicist, and she would say, oh, Tina loves music. She was French. And so she would say, oh, Tina loves music. She's loved music since Liberace. And so then she would say, oh, Tina can do this for you. You want another English handbell ringer? Tina will do it. And so I got to go to the 1964 World's Fair and play. And I got to go to Times Square and stay at the YMCA in Times Square as a 12-year-old girl. It was very exciting. We saw a lot of things that we weren't supposed to look at. And we had we were told, don't look, girls, don't look at that man. Oh, don't look. And so I had so many experiences, but it was really great because growing up like that, because we didn't have to have money, we could enjoy people and places. And in fact, that's my advice to everybody. Don't have money, have rich friends instead, and go visit them, stay with them, and bring them a really nice gift, house gift. And just be super polite, and you won't that goes for everything, whether you want to ride on a yacht or anything. It's just better to just not own it. So I had a great life. And Chris, when I met Chris at Rhode Island School of Design, it took a long time. We were friends for a long time because I had a boyfriend, he had a girlfriend, but it took a long time but we connected right away as friends. And we were friends for, over 2 years before we hooked up. And it made it a more natural, easy transition into music with him, because I played flute and folk guitar at the time, and he said, "I'm forming a rock band. Won't you be in it?" And I said, "Oh, no, no, you can't. I can't be in a rock band. That's for guys, you know. Nobody will accept a girl in a band." And they said, "Oh, but what about Fanny?" I said, "Well, Fanny are great, but they're all girls." And they were great. But you saw how tough it was for them. They couldn't really make inroads. It was just the life was so ridiculously hard.
What band is that?
Fanny, Fanny.
I have to look them up.
They
never-
were late 60s, early 70s. Fantastic. I think part Native American. Amazing women. I mean, if you look up any documentary about them now, you'll just say, how did this get by? Why weren't, it was like the story of Sugarman Rodriguez. It just went past because they weren't guys and they weren't white, you know, so
They were sort of white.
they were
But-
really,
but
they were much more exotic. They were much more beautiful.
Then Susie Quattro started releasing records in the United States, and I would show them to Tina, and I'd say, "Look, Tina, Susie Quattro
Yeah.
playing the bass and singing," and you know,
Yeah.
Tina was very leery of being in a rock and roll band, but always very supportive. And but then one of the great days of my life, is one of the best days of my life, it was the day she walked into our loft on Christie Street in New York with a Fender Precision bass that she'd been putting like $5 here, $5 there on layaway. She bought it on layaway, and she still didn't have an amplifier, but but she had a guitar.
That was a start.
That was a good start. Yeah.
Yeah. I plugged into David Byrne's amp and he just said, "You be quiet now." And so we never really heard what we sounded like until about 2 years in a guy from CBS, Mark Spector, Columbia Records. He came and he brought us into a studio to record a demo, which was just us playing live, everything we had live. And it was a fabulous experience, because for the first time we were given, but it was a reel-to-reel tape and we had no reel-to-reel player. So it was the most frustrating thing to never hear what we sounded like, except in rehearsal. So we repeated and rehearsed every single day. We'd come home from our day jobs, take turns, who shopped, who made dinner, and who did the dishes. And then as soon as that was over, it was crack the whip, start writing songs, start playing. And then, around 10 or 11 p.m., you could hang out at CBGB's for an hour, and then it was time to get to bed, because there was a day job the next morning.
Right.
And but I tell you, I have to say that kind of experience, even for someone like me, I mean, my parents were kind of horrified where we lived. That experience was a driver. Had we been given everything, had it been cushy, had we had even our own personal bathroom and shower, maybe we wouldn't have worked so hard. It was, we didn't get dentistry for 10 years,
But then when we did, we got a celebrity dentist.
Yes. Many.
He's like, "I fixed Patti Smith's teeth." John Belushi, he came to me, he was grinding his teeth too much. Oh boy. Well,
yeah. But
I'm
sorry, I've digressed too much.
I'm thinking that, do you have another question, Drew, or anything you'd like to?
I just want to ask, I'm just curious about what you were talking about, Tina. Like, what was it that changed your mind? Why did you, did you change your mind in secret, and then you were saving up to get the...
What changed my mind was, well, it was it's quite convoluted, but the short story is that I saw Patti Smith on stage. Well, first I saw Muddy Waters at the Chicken Shack in Nantucket, or maybe it was Block Island. And I was just so moved by this man who must have been, oh gosh, he seemed quite old to me. I was 20, and he just played his heart out, even though there were maybe 5 people there in the audience. But I mean, the number of people who came to see him were fewer than who were on stage, but he played his heart out anyway. And I was so moved by it that I just said, you know, am I going to really say no to music for the rest of my life? And then I went to see Patti Smith at CBGB, and I thought, well, she doesn't really know what she's doing either, but she just does it with such passion and with such, you know, everything about it was authentic. And so there was nothing phony about it. There were, you know, I always used to say to my friends, well, sequins, you know, in Las Vegas, sequins are a substitute. They're a stylized form of perspiration and sweat to glimmer and gleam on the person. So Muddy Waters was actually sweating. Patti Smith and her band, they were just a wonderful group of people. And then of course, then I saw other bands as well, the Ramones and so on. And television, I was very taken with television. I thought, this is like a classical musical quartet. There, not one person is duplicating what any other person is doing there. And Richard Hell was still in the group, and I thought he was wonderful. And I thought that what Richard Lloyd and Tom Verlaine were doing in their guitar interchanges was absolutely brilliant. And I thought, I like this. And so I was very, very moved by my contemporaries, much more so than, I mean, I love the, you know, the Beatles and all that prior, the Beach Boys, but, and so many, but this was, oh, I don't have to be a superstar to do this. I can just jump in there and just learn. I mean, I actually thought, oh, only 4 strings on the bass. How hard can that be? And it was a whole other thing, but you know, I was just very moved by Chris's patience, and David was very patient with me at the time. A little annoyed always, but patient for the most part. And because I was willing to do it all. And plus I had the car. I drove the band, right? I drove the amps, and I had to pay for all of that. But you know, everybody brings something to the table, and I love their sensibility. Chris was the first to write lyrics, and then David, we had written one song, Psycho Killer, while we were still at RISD. David wasn't at RISD. He hadn't been for 3 years, but
he was still hanging
but
out.
he was hanging out with people and using the, you know, the facilities. And he came with this song because he wanted to have this, I thought it was a great idea, Psycho Killer. He wanted to do a song like Alice Cooper in the style of Alice Cooper, which I thought, well, that's odd. You know, why would you want to do that? But I mean, I thought, why not go for the Stooges or, you know, MC5? That would be, anyway. So, but he liked those bands too. And so he said, I have this song, I have the chorus, and I have the beginnings of a first verse. But I need something that creates a kind of a schizophrenic situation where it changes language. And he'd already asked somebody, a Japanese girl, I guess. You thought it was a Japanese girl.
Yeah.
I thought it was a Greek girl. I don't remember. But he'd already asked a girl to do it, and she refused. Said, oh, I won't write anything about a psycho killer. So I said, oh, well, I think it's a great idea. I would write something in French, and, you know, something very much based on kind of like Hitchcock kind of psychology, because that's and go from there. And so I wrote something very grandiose. I was thinking of something like Napoleon, but of course, today's contemporary would be I am a very stable genius. And so that's the gist of the French that I wrote. And then Chris wrote some other verses with him, and we completed the chorus, which wasn't complete. And then he wanted to know, well, in France, what do they say? What's a typical French rock pop song? What does it sound like? I said, oh, you don't know? Well, there was this phenomenon called Yay Yay Girls, and like Françoise Hardy and so on. And they called them les Yay Yay. Some of them were actually British, but they sang in French and English. And they would say a lot of yeah, 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 like the Beatles, les Bertels, as they say in France. So that got thrown in there as well. I mean, it was, and I thought, well, this is fun. This is a real collaboration, and it's lighthearted and fun. And we later did an interview with, was it Michael Gilmore, the writer?
Yeah.
And from Rolling Stone, and we were very upset about his brother who had been executed, who wanted to be. And I mean, all that, for 10 years before that, there had been no executions in the United States. The death penalty was just out. And then his begging for it brought it all back. And so we said, do you mind that we have this song called Psycho Killer? And he said, well, this is something my whole family has to deal with. And he was really an amazing, remarkable, and sensitive and intelligent thinker, very reflective on it all. And so it was a really interesting thing. And then, of course, we were in the middle of playing this song, Psycho Killer, in Berkeley Plaza up in San Francisco. And then we learned that Harvey Milk had been murdered. So we have always had a lot of, even though we thought, oh, this was just fun, we always thought, well, yeah, I mean, we're never going to figure out what a psycho killer really is. We're never going to really understand it. They can be completely sane. They know right from wrong. But it's just not something that normal people are ever going to get. So maybe it's a kind of song that creates a kind of release, a joyful release, the same way that Fela Ransom Kuti would write songs, political songs, making fun of the police, zombie, and they would turn something really deathly and horrible, horrific, into a joyous chant, a song that was a kind of cathartic release for people. So that's kind of why I joined. I thought it was very immediate. I thought I've always adored music. I just thought, oh, but it's the path not chosen that one always regrets, right? I think, oh, I threw away my whole painting career. But Chris kept saying, oh, you can go back to painting anytime, but it's never happened. And it never will. That's, as Chris says, Courvoisier under the bridge. Just throw it under.
No, I think what I said is Courvoisier down the jacuzzi.
Yeah, well, it's all the same. It's just a waste. So my poor parents.
I'm sorry, I have to take this call.
Okay. We can wrap it up there. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I really appreciate you guys doing this. Fascinating to hear you talk about all these things. And yeah,
well, I love the idea of your museum.
Thank you.
It really is. And I'm crazy about Michael's book. I mean, it's just I've seen, there have been many, 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 many photography books, including Chris Stein's very excellent ones. Mm-hmm. He was a smart one he had the perfect muse and model.
Right. Yeah, he has some great stuff too, definitely.
But I do like yours. Yours one probably my favorite so far.
Thank you. When you guys are in Los Angeles, let's have dinner or drink, and if I come to Connecticut, I'll let you know.
Would love
to.
Great. Would love to.
It'd be wonderful. So
All right, everyone. Well, thanks again for doing this. Sorry for the hiccup at the beginning. And I think this is great.
Super.
Okay.
thank you both.
Thank you so much.